Well, Andrew, that's the end of Simpsons month. What a recording.
Satsu, did you hit the record button?
No! Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Simpsons Month. My name's Satsunami, and joining me for our worst episode
so far.
is none other than the one and only Andrew. Andrew, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. Looking forward to discussing one of the big events in the Simpsons universe.
Yeah, one of the sparing events of the Simpsons universe, and I know we're getting ahead of ourselves there, but yeah, today we're going to be talking about something that was hyped to heck and back, because let's face it, how long had it been before this film came out that people were clamouring for a Simpsons film?
Yeah, I mean, I was so young at the time that I can't really attest to that too much, but I do know retroactively that there was a lot of interest in a Simpsons movie, and there'd been a lot of discussion for so many years about a Simpsons movie. There was lots of plots discussed about what could be done in the Simpsons movie.
I was going to say, don't rub it in. You young'un. Yeah, it's true though. There was a lot of talk about The Simpsons going on the big screen and everything, and when we were growing up, The Simpsons, is it safe to say, was still at the height of the popularity, even though they had the struggling seasons.
I don't know that it was necessarily at the height of its popularity. I certainly was still watching Simpsons from week to week at that point. I was really excited for this movie. I remember the anticipation and going to see it pretty much opening weekend. There was a lot of hype leading up to this, and the episodes that were coming up around that were very interesting. We were in between seasons 18 and 19, and so there'd been some interesting episodes that had come out in season 18 that were getting you in the mood to then watch this movie.
I actually remember going to the cinema at the time and seeing a lot of the trailers and the teasers for this film. But the weird thing was, and I don't know if you remember this, but there wasn't really much information about this film coming out. There was rumours and there was, oh, this might happen, that might happen. But do you actually remember seeing a full-length trailer and being like, oh, I know everything about this film?
No, and that, to be honest, I think is quite a good thing. I'm always of the mind that going into a movie without knowing every detail of the plot is better. I mean, it's not particularly a hot take, but yeah, I think that's commendable. If something looks amusing or draws you in to watch it without telling you every detail that you need to know before going in, then I think that it's succeeded.
No, I totally agree with you. I do think that it is amazing that they managed to pull it off, especially for a film and, of course, a series as big as The Simpsons, especially in 2007 when this film came out. But there was a lot of teasers, I think they did a Superman parody because Superman Returns, I think it was, the really bad one with Kevin Spacey as Luthor.
Yeah,
that was coming out, so they had a teaser trailer with Homer and the Superman t-shirt. They had the Spider-Man tie-in, because in 2007 I'm pretty sure that's when Spider-Man 3 came out, so they had Spider-Pig. So there was a lot of tie-ins to other films, but there wasn't really any information coming out. And I'll tell you how hyped I was personally, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, Andrew, but when I was in high school, for our computing class, one of the tasks we had to do was create a newsletter. So we had to format it and everything, and the teacher kind of shrugged and said, well, you can make it about anything. If you want to make it about the latest games or a film or something, go ahead. So I asked my teacher, I said, can I do it on The Simpsons? And she kind of shrugged, and I don't think she cared, to be honest. She was like, look, get it done, I don't care. But I ended up doing it on The Simpsons, and don't get me wrong, that was a really fun class that time. But one of the article bits I did was gathering information for the Simpsons film, and I always remember how difficult it was trying to go onto 2007's internet and try and get a plot synopsis and everything, and all I knew was that Homer does something to wreck the town and they have to flee, and that was really it. So yeah, it was very sparring, but there was a lot of build up, there was a lot of hype, and even despite some of the ill will that was starting to build up throughout this particular period of The Simpsons, it is safe to say though that everybody was excited for this film.
Yeah, I think there was certainly a universal excitement for the movie. I know that people had started to see a downturn in the quality of episodes, or rather that they had, in their own personal opinion, they no longer cared for The Simpsons as much. But this once in a lifetime opportunity of seeing The Simpsons Simpsons as a movie, I think did interest even those who'd kind of lost interest in the series.
And I've got to ask before we dive into the main discussion of this episode, did you go see this in the cinema?
I did. As I said earlier, I'm pretty sure I went opening weekend to go see this in the cinema.
I can't actually remember. I went to see it and then I got annoyed at the very beginning because I thought a child was humming along to the 20th Century Fox theme. And then I realised it was Ralph Wiggum on the screen.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, I loved that. I thought that was such a fun idea. I like when studios sort of play with their little studio logo being a little bit different. I actually saw a tweet about this recently about like how different studios have a bit of fun with that. Like Warner Brothers often has a little bit of fun with changing the style of the Warner Brothers logo at the beginning of a film, depending on the film that's about to show.
See, without any further ado, will we just jump into why we think this is... I was about to joke and say the Citizen Kane of The Simpsons, but will we just dive into it?
Yeah, let's jump into it.
As always, we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome to Satsunami, a variety podcast that discusses topics from gaming and films to anime and general interests.
Previously on Chatsunami, we've analysed what makes a good horror game, conducted a retrospective on Pierce Brosnan's run as James Bond, and listened to us take deep dives into both the Sonic and Halo franchises.
Also, if you're an anime fan, then don't forget to check us out on our sub-series, Chatsunani, where we dive into the world of anime. So far, we've reviewed things like Death Note, Princess Mononoke, and the hit Beyblade series.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps.
As always, stay safe,
Stay awesome, and most importantly,
Stay hydrated.
I'm Dan,
I'm Lou, and together we are Casting Views.
an uncle and nephew chatting on random topics, some heavy, some fun, but we aim to amuse.
Don't miss out, don't delay. Subscribe to Casting Views today.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and Good Pods.
This episode is sponsored by Zencastr. If you're a podcaster that records remotely like me, then you'll know how challenging it can be to create the podcast you've always wanted. That's where Zencastr comes in. Before I met Zencastr, I was but a naive podcaster, recording on low quality, one-track audio waves. But with Zencastr, you can kiss those fears goodbye as they provide crystal clear audio and HD video. Plus, with our all-in-one podcasting suite, recording with guests is extremely simple. From local recordings to post-production, Zencastr has it all. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code CHATSUNAMI. You'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experience I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. So, before we dive into talking about what this film is about, let's face it, this film came out in 2007 and we are definitely going to be going into spoilers, so this is just spoiler warning for a 2007 film. But before we talk about the plot and really what makes this film so great, well, we talk about the development of this film, because as we said, it is quite interesting that before this particular film there wasn't really any film that had come out, not even like an attempt at like a long form episode of the show, and by this point The Simpsons was on season 18.
We had the 2-part episode of Who Shot Mr. Burns, which many had kind of felt should have been the movie and would have been a more interesting movie. Like if they'd extended that out and made that into a movie, it would have made more sense, because it was a bridging episode between season 6 and 7. That was the height of Simpson interest, I think. Like that was their golden years of episodes. So like if between season 6 and 7 they'd released that as a movie, that would have been better than what we ultimately got. We'll discuss in this episode more our thoughts on the movie, but I do think that would have been superior to what we eventually did get with the 2007 version. There was a thought process behind making a movie before that. They wanted to make the episode in season 4, Camp Krusty, into a film, but thought that trying to expand that 25-minute episode into a feature-length movie would have been too difficult, so they didn't really want to go much further with that. They thought about making anthology stories, a bit like Treehouse of Horror. They thought about doing almost a Fantasia-esque movie called Simpstasia. And I know that prior to his unfortunate death in 1998, Phil Hartman, who voices, you may have heard him as such characters as Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz, before his passing, he wanted to do a live-action movie based on the character of Troy McClure. And then I know in the early 2000s, the cast had signed on to do a movie. Like, it'd been greenlit. They were like, okay, well, let's do this. And then, I don't know if it was, I think we were in Groening and Brooks, who were sort of produced and created the show. Their feeling at the time was that if they put effort into a movie at that point, less effort would be going into the show and the show's quality would deteriorate. And they didn't want that.
Boy, I bet their faces were red.
And so their kind of impression was that they should just focus on their bread and butter of the show instead of trying to do this more experimental movie version of this universe.
It is interesting, though, that for such an iconic franchise, they took so long from 1989 all the way to 2007 to actually create a film. I mean, for God's sake, the Digimon film got a film before them, and that was like 3 films in one. Come on, they're both owned by Fox. I actually wouldn't put it past Fox if they just put 2 episodes together and went, yeah, that's a Simpsons film. But yeah, it's fascinating to see how long this film was in development. You know, the ideas that they kind of threw together, and God, it does sound like an American sitcom, doesn't it? It's like a will they, won't they? Will they make the film? Won't they make the film? And then, of course, they eventually did, where we got a very strange mix of religious and environmental messaging in this film. But before we deep dive into that, do you want to give a quick synopsis into what this film's actually about?
Yeah, for sure. So the Simpsons movie essentially takes place somewhat in Springfield, where an environmental disaster has occurred as a result of the citizens of Springfield polluting their lake. And as a result of that, the government cordons the town off out of fear that their stupidity and pollution would spread. And so the Simpsons manage to escape because it is Homer's fault that this ultimately happens. And then they kind of learn that the plan from the government is to destroy Springfield. And so they have to come back to Springfield, save the day, and rescue the town. During that, they have all kinds of family fallouts, and you get a lot of emotional moments and comedic moments with a somewhat satisfactory ending with the Simpsons winning at the end of the day. Did I cover everything?
Yeah. No, I thought you did a fantastic job of summarising it there. But I've got to ask you though, see the first time you watched this film, what were your initial impressions? Did you think this was a return to form for The Simpsons? Or did you watch it and think, that was a thing?
As I've said in other episodes, at this time on first airing, I didn't see much difference between what I was watching on TV in the early 2000s from the older episodes that are considered kind of the golden age of The Simpsons. I had no issue with what I was watching on TV and tuned in every Sunday to watch new episodes. And so this just seemed like more of that, and I liked it. There were parts 12-year-old, or rather 11-year-old me raised my eyebrow about, but ultimately I enjoyed it. It wasn't really a case of return to form. It wasn't really a case of this is meh kind of thing. I think I enjoyed the movie at the time, and there was the whole controversy over the very early stages of the movie. Bart very briefly showing his penis.
His ding-a-ling, please.
His ding-a-ling, yeah.
This film is over.
Bart very briefly showing his ding-a-ling, and that was the big talking point, like, oh my god, they showed a penis in a children's animated movie. And I remember going back to my brother being like, oh my god, it was like on screen for like forever. And my brother was like, it was on screen for about half a second.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I felt the same way, where you did see it and you're like, oh my god, can they get away with that? That went on for ages, and you're right, it goes on for like 1 second or 2, and that's it, and you're like, huh.
Yeah, it is probably 1 Mississippi at most.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the most controversial part of it. I mean, other than killing Green Day at the very beginning, but, you know.
Well, I mean, some of the other controversies that kind of surround it, I would say, is just sort of maybe ruining continuity, which The Simpsons have never been shy of doing. They quite frequently ruin their own continuity with regards to Marge and Homer's wedding. That I remember bothering me at the time, because I knew that wasn't what Marge and Homer's wedding was like. There's a scene in the movie in which Marge tapes over their wedding video to make a point about how their marriage is over. And you see a clip of the wedding. From early Simpsons episodes, we know that they had a bit of a quick shotgun wedding and didn't really have that kind of romantic videotaped wedding like that. And so it felt very out of place.
I don't know. I do agree with you. I'm very defensive when it comes to certain parts of the lore, like when it comes to how Homer and Marge met, their kind of story. And I think the reason behind that is probably because it's something that's kind of held in high reverence that's important for their characterization. That's why I hate, and this is slightly off topic, but that's why I hate the episode Sadgasm, the one where they say, oh, Homer and Marge met in the 90s, and I know why they did that.
Oh, is that the one where Homer becomes like a rock star?
Yeah, pretty much. There's only one line in that did make me laugh, but other than that, the whole thing just really irritates me. But for that particular scene, and again, this is something that we were talking about in the last two previous episodes about what made The Simpsons so great, or maybe not so great, was that idea of an emotional core. And after watching the early to mid-teen seasons, there was a lot more episodes where they just happened, and I was like, okay, this isn't as emotional, I don't know if I'm really into this. But I was surprised at how gut-punched I felt, and I know I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but the fact that they had this very poignant scene, which, don't get me wrong, gets ruined a couple of scenes later, but the fact they had this poignant scene of Marge at the beginning, as you said, the town turn against the Simpsons, and there's another controversial scene where they imply that they're going to hang Maggie, which I thought, even for the Simpsons, hanging a baby's a bit dark. It's not
a little bit. I quite liked how they were joking about it with the pacifier on it, though. I thought that was kind of funny.
And after that, when they're running away, Marge grabs the tape, and you can see how important it is to her. Our family's important to her, our memories are important to her. And then when Homer betrays their trust by being selfish, ruining the town, ruining their lives, and then when Marge needs Homer there, he just abandons her. It's like, no, screw them, which I know he has a bit of a point because they tried to kill him. And after that, I would probably be in the same boat. But I do absolutely love that scene. I do think that is probably the best scene in the entire film, purely because it is just such a emotional moment where there's quite a, and this is something I didn't notice until I was researching this, but there's a really neat touch, in fact two neat touches. The first being that apparently they asked the voice actress for Marge, Julie Kavner, to do that scene several times over until she sounded tired and run down, and that's why she sounds so just despondent, which I thought was brilliant. But the other one was, see when Marge drops the bombshell and says, and to show you how serious I am, I taped over our wedding tape. You can see Homer's face in the reflection when it cuts out, and then it goes to their wedding, and then they play the very iconic Carpenter song, Close to You. It's just such a beautiful moment, because that's also a callback, I'm pretty sure, to them having that song together. And, it felt like old Simpsons again. See, for that brief bubble moment, because there's a lot of silliness in this film. Some bits land, other bits don't, but I feel as if for that particular scene, that is the only one that I would say is the perfect moment in a sea of otherwise maybe silliness. You expect The Simpsons to be silly, but would you say that there is too much silliness even for The Simpsons in this film?
I do think so. I think they try a bit too hard in some scenes, and they kind of hitting on the Family Guy-ness of The Simpsons, which is a big issue at the time. One kind of comes to mind is when Homer's all depressed and he's at the bar and he's playing Grand Theft Walrus. What is that joke? It's just a penguin dances, and then as a walrus in a car, you shoot the penguin.
Yeah, I think that was a reference to when Happy Feet had come out, and GTA 4 came out in 2008, I think. So, a year after, but it was still the run-up to the game getting advertised, so...
But, it's still not really a joke. And, are they writing backwards from Happy Feet, from the dancing penguin that then gets shot? What was the thought process behind that joke? It seems so out of place.
Although, imagine the comments we're going to get from, a Simpsons movie lore aficionado. It's going to be like, you don't understand, it's a cultural critique of cinema. For legal reasons, that's a joke. There does seem to be a lot of weird, out-of-place moments. Do you want to know what my pet peeve moment is?
What's that?
Colin. Do you remember Colin?
Yeah, the little Irish boy.
For no reason. He appears at the beginning, he appears during the mob scene, and then he appears at the end.
It's to give Lisa something to do in the movie, because she has nothing else to do in this movie. They're so lazy with the character of Lisa. Lisa. I think particularly around this time period that they just don't develop her enough. And the movie just does next to nothing with her. It's so highly focused on Bart, Homer, and Marge that Lisa is such a push to the side character. And then Maggie is, as is often the case, is kind of just an afterthought. But I mean, she's a baby, so.
I mean, even she has funny moments. I'm just thinking of, see the scene where they're in the motel and they all look at Homer when he sneaks back in and Maggie's in the drawer and she just rises up and glares at him. Oh yeah, and the bottle smashing as well when she fights off Mr. Teeny. That was quite funny, but you're right, Lisa doesn't really have much to do in this one. I was listening to someone else talk about this film and they said it would have been an interesting idea if they developed the relationship between Lisa and Milhouse. And I know that they don't usually get on, but it would have been more interesting because they're both pre-established characters, you know, and they've both got that connection.
Milhouse is the character they're determined to be like, he is a dweeb who obsesses over her and you should not settle for that. And Lisa is better than Milhouse.
So yeah, let's throw in the pitch perfect Colin, who is an environmentalist and a musician and only appears for 3 scenes. I don't get Colin. I'm sorry, I just genuinely...
He doesn't really offend me. I quite like he's not Bono.
He's not Bono, yeah, I like that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. The whole plot of it is outlandish, obviously. It's like a huge dome over Springfield.
I don't mind that so much. And the whole idea of destroying Springfield, it had been an idea for like such a long time. Initially, the idea was that Steven Spielberg, voiced by himself, would destroy the town as part of like a movie that he wanted to make with Tom Hanks. And then they had the idea that Hank Scorpio would return to be the antagonist, but that didn't end up happening. I wish they'd stuck to an existing character as the villain, like a Mr. Burns, a Hank Scorpio, a Sideshow Bob. These would be much more interesting than like fake government agent. That's very strange that that's the route they took for this. There were a few things that kind of bothered me in the movie, scene from scene. I wasn't really a fan of the shaman lady and like her use.
Yeah, I hate that. I'm just going to hop in quickly and agree with you. I feel as if it wasn't that funny when I first watched it, but upon rewatching it and showing it to my partner for the first time, that just derailed the entire film for me.
It didn't seem particularly culturally sensitive.
Well, yeah, that too.
It did teach me the word epiphany at 11 years old. I never heard of that word prior to watching the movie. So that was something it gave me. But then the whole thing, her like big swinging boobs directing him, and then that whole scene, yeah, you're right. It slowed down the movie. And I do remember at the time watching it and feeling like the movie had kind of gone to like a bit of a weird place at that point. So I wasn't particularly thrilled by that. And the other thing that often irks me as well is the very end when Maggie knocks the antagonist, Russ Cargill, over the head. Where did she come from? I don't like this use of Maggie as like a deus ex machina. The whole joke with her and Mr. Burns was it was just an accident. And then they had her becoming some almost like a super assassin type character. Like there was that one episode where the mob is after Homer and she shoots them from the bedroom and then like hides a gun under her bed.
That became a Flanderization, didn't it? That she became this ruthless, as you said, assassin baby.
Do you think it was a Stewie Griffin type thing? Do you think that's why?
Now, that is an interesting point. Maybe. I mean, obviously she's not characterised as being evil, but as the seasons got on further, there is definitely that shift between her acting like a baby and this whole moulding her identity over her shooting Mr. Burns. Because you're right, there's and I can't remember what episode or season it is, but there is literally a scene where Smithers bursts into the room of the Simpsons home and is like, oh no, Maggie shot Mr. Burns again. And it's supposed to be like this throwaway line, and you're just like, is that her identity now? That she is just a gun-toting baby?
They had set her up as being adventurous, like outgoing, as like a joke of her age. Like I remember there was that episode where Marge is in Streetcar Named Desire. I think it's Streetcar Named Marge, maybe the episode title. And she's put into like baby daycare, and it's kind of like a parody of The Great Escape. And so she does a whole almost like a chicken run style, which also is a parody of The Great Escape. She tries to get her pacifier back and does all these crazy little plots to do that. And so you do have to kind of understand that that's where they've been going with her before, but hiding like an actual gun under her bed and appearing presumably out of nowhere by the Springfield Gorge to then whack or like push a rock over Russ Cargill. That just didn't seem right. That didn't play for me.
Speaking of rushed parts of this film, one of the other bits that does annoy me is, and this is one of the positive points that I have about this film as well, I do love a lot of the themes that they try to explore in this film. And I know obviously there's the religious themes, there's the environmental themes, they're the most prominent ones, but in between that you've got the theme of family, you've got the theme of a fractured family that is falling apart because of the selfishness of one member. The fact is that because of that fracture, Bart is seeing Flanders, of all people, as this ideal father figure. There's even this particular scene where they go fishing, and I do laugh at that scene every time, where he gets the bug zapper and he puts it in the lake and it kills all the fish. I always laugh at that. And Bart chokes himself before he realises that Flanders isn't going to do that. And that is an interesting dynamic and everything. But at the very end, it seems like the conflict is very rushed. They just say, oh, Bart, you can hold the bomb. And then I know that would be a Bart Simpson thing to do. You'd be like, oh, the man knows me, and he grabs the bomb and, they ride up. It is something that Bart would do, but see, at the same time, you're kind of like, well, I don't know. I feel as if they built it up really well.
He does give a bit of a speech to him prior to that, but you do kind of feel like it's almost like an abusive partner trying to win you back, but like this time it'll be different. Bart would be better off with the Flanders. Homer is just always going to be a jerk ass.
I mean, especially at this period of time in the Simpsons lore. But again, I know they have to get the film moving along, but one of the other nitpick moments I have to admit I have is the fact that they didn't use Rainier Wolfcastle as the president.
Yes, I agree with that. That they decided to make it Arnold Schwarzenegger when Rainier Wolfcastle was a parody of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they essentially just did the same voice, which I think is a Harry Shearer.
I think so, yeah.
They just did the same voice. The character design is pretty much the same. I think they just changed the hair, I think, is the only thing that's really different. I think they maybe give him a few wrinkles. And they try and get away with this joke about Arnold Schwarzenegger being the president, because at the time he was governor of California. But I mean, not to push my glasses too far up my nose, but Arnold Schwarzenegger, born in Austria, could not be the president of the United States because he was not born in the United States. He can be a governor, but not the president.
Well, never say never.
Apparently. The Simpsons universe is into a universe of its own, I guess. It doesn't have to follow the laws of US politics.
I mean, considering this film kicks off because of a massive silo of pig crap, I feel as if we can let that go by.
It's not the only silo of pig crap in this movie.
But yeah, apparently the reason behind that was that George W. Bush was the president at the time, and they felt as if they used him, then the film would be dated. But then they were kind of hoping that Arnie would be a bit more popular by the time the film came out.
Instead of an adulterous piece of shit.
Yeah, I don't know whether that coincides with that scandal. I'm assuming it does, because my god, it has been a while.
I think it was around that time, yeah.
Yeah, so they were like, let's just hope it blows over. So it would have made more sense for Rainier Wolfcastle to come in, but again, it's not a major thing that I'm going to say, oh, I hate the film because of it, but that is definitely one of the things I think they could have probably done to briefly improve it.
I guess they wanted to try and make it a bit more accessible, in that those who didn't remember Rainier Wolfcastle's character would just be able to understand just straight up making it Arnold Schwarzenegger instead. And for someone who wasn't like an avid Simpsons watcher that was just kind of watching this movie, they'd be like, oh, that's funny, Arnold Schwarzenegger is the president.
Damn normies coming into the Simpsons movie.
Let's just start gatekeeping the Simpsons.
Yeah. You're not allowed to like it until you watch all 34 seasons, or if you're watching it in the future, all 100 seasons.
Yeah, we can't date this episode.
Yeah, of course not. When they unearth this in the time capsule. But going on to the positives though, is there anything you would say that this film does excel at or does better than the average episode?
There were some bits for sure that I enjoyed, and they worked well at the subversion of humor as well. The whipping the sled dogs and like whipping them, like, yelling rest while still whipping them was very funny, followed by when he was being mauled saying, it's my whipping arm. That is objectively very funny. And I liked when Homer was in the motorcycle cage at the fairground and he kept going up and then falling, going up and falling and going up and then falling. And the guy at the thing says, because I like seeing you hurt yourself, I'll give you one more try. That also gave me a bit of a chuckle. There were lots of other smaller moments throughout it that gave me a bit of a chuckle, like the government listening to your every conversation, Nelson firing a red arrow so he'd know which one was his. Just a lot of stuff to do with what was going on inside the dome, and like people in the church running to the bar and people in the bar running to the church. These are some good visual gags that they squeezed in. Yeah, and there's another good point where Homer tries to get into the dome, dresses up as a officer, hands over to like someone who's supposed to be like a just general soldier outside to release the town, but it's written on a leaf, and so he punches the guy. Another bit around similar time where he tries to stop the van that's taking his family back into the town, but he has all these misspelt signs like "sop," "yelled," and "one vey." It keeps working on the guards, which is quite funny. And then the last one is the use of the subverted humor of when he sees a jetpack, which could get him up the dome much easier, and instead he gets the super glue and tries that, which is then kind of ruined by the grabbing his crotch scene, which I didn't find was in great taste.
This is a sophisticated film.
Well, yeah, no, I get that, but
No,
I do think that it was kind of a cheaper joke that I didn't think was necessary. What are your thoughts on those and other positives from the movie?
Yeah, I would agree with all of them. I do think that there is a lot of very memorable moments and very memorable iconography if we take away Bart skating nude for a second there, because that's obviously done for shock value, because you've also got the scene where for the first time Homer gives the middle finger. Well, I say middle finger.
They only have 4, so I guess it's like just the second from left finger or whatever it is.
Yeah, because that's what I keep thinking. I'm like, how do you know? What if that's your pointing finger? That's an episode for another day. But yeah, I mean, there's all the moments there. There's a lot of quotability in this film. As much as I hate Spider Pig, or not hate, but dislike it a lot, because I felt as if it was used so much in the advertising and the marketing. As I said before, I didn't know much about the plot, but I sure as hell knew about Spider Pig, and I was like, oh, this is tedious. Again, going back to just adding on to what you were saying, I did like the fact that when the film wanted to have like a genuine, sincere moment, it took its time to do that, you know, with the relationship between Bart and Flanders, or with Homer and Marge, or with Lisa and the fact that she'll never be relevant in this film. You know, they really took their time to let these particular relationships breathe. There were a couple of awkward moments. Again, going back to when Bart skates nude and then for some reason they handcuff him naked outside a Krusty Burger, and then Nelson laughs at him, and then all these other people are laughing at a naked child, and you're like, really? You know, it's like one of those things you don't really think about when you watch the film, and then when you look back on it, you're like, okay, this is a bit strange. The other bit, of course, is when Marge and Homer snuggle, to use their words, and I do think it is kind of funny, you know, when it's a Disney parody, that it's all the animals getting them ready, and they have to like get a bald eagle in to just undress Homer.
And they all look in horror as well.
Yeah, the doe covers its child's eyes. Okay, that one is quite outlandish, but it's still quite funny. There's also a really weird joke. I don't think it's a good part of it, but it's where, and I don't know if you remember this, where Ned says, oh, I think the Lord's trying to tell me something. And for some reason, Homer crosses his fingers and says, gay, 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 gay.
Yeah, that's very much of its time, isn't it?
It really is. I don't know why they used that joke. I hate using this sincerely to say it was a different time, but the early to mid 2000s definitely was that era of those kind of jokes.
Happy Pride Month, everyone.
Happy. You good? Happy Love Day, everyone!
I hope you keep that in.
Of course I'm keeping this in. Of course, going back to what I was saying before, I do love the sincere moments in this, especially, as I said, with the Marge and Homer scene, with their relationship and everything, with the relationship between the townsfolk and things. There's just a lot of moments, and I do love the Easter eggs in the background, like when they actually jump the gorge from, I think as far back as it's either 1 or 2. I want to say it's season 2, but
I think it's a little bit later now. I think it might be 3 or 4.
Season 2, episode 8.
Oh,
so it's the
you were
finale.
right. You were right. I'm sorry.
Look at me. Now I'm pushing my glasses up going, at last, I win. But yeah, I liked those kind of references. And I think it was kind of weird that they killed off Dr. Nick at one point and they just never explained that.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, he doesn't appear again after the movie. Like, I don't think he appears again in the show.
Where's Dr. Nick? Is he safe? Please tell me he's not dead.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, I don't actually remember if he does.
I think that is his last appearance.
Possibly, which is quite depressing, to be honest. That's the way they killed him off, just, yeah.
There's so many characters like like that though. Like growing up not realizing about the death of Phil Hartman, I didn't realize the point in which we didn't get any more Troy McClure or Lionel Hutz. And like it didn't kind of cross my mind that we hadn't seen those characters in so long because it was syndicated so much. I was seeing him in episodes all the time. And so it hadn't even crossed my mind that I hadn't seen him in a newer episode and like why that might be.
Yeah, it's when you look it up and you're like, I wonder what happened to that character. And then you're like, oh,
his wife.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, God. True Crime Month next, everyone. But to summarise my thoughts on the film, I do think that this film was relatively a step in the right direction. I didn't feel as if it was the worst I've ever seen of The Simpsons. And at the time, absolutely loved it. I loved the emotional core, as I said. I loved the characterisation of a lot of the characters. Looking back on it now, though, as an adult and as someone who now lives in 2023 as opposed to 2007, which is very depressing, but I digress. The fact is, I do think for the most part the film does hold up, and it is a neat time capsule, but some of the references date it, like Spider Pig and so on, and Grand Theft Walrus.
Yeah, I mean, the Grand Theft Walrus, as I've already pointed out, I just really hated that scene. But, I mean, Spider-Man is pretty timeless. I mean, that we're always kind of getting Spider-Man content. So, I mean, the joke itself of just kind of the absurdism is very of its time. And I think that's what particularly dates those jokes. There's been references to Spider-Pig in later seasons of the show. As been like, hey guys, remember the movie? I don't like that. I don't enjoy that they've done that. There are points in this movie which we didn't touch on, which are still funny. Like you talked about the scene at the start where Bart is naked and locked to a pole. The line of, and we referenced it earlier in the episode, of this is the worst day of my life, and then Homer says the worst day of your life so far. I think that is a very funny line. It is very much jerk-ass Homer, but I think it is peak funny jerk-ass Homer. And there's a scene towards the end when Bart runs off with Homer onto the bike, and either Rod or Todd says, like, I wish Homer was my father. And Ned just quickly responds that I wish you didn't have the devil's curly hair, clearly touching a nerve there, which you don't often see with Ned. So I thought that was quite a funny little insight into Ned. But my kind of overall thoughts on the movie, as very similar to yours, is that it's an okay movie. It's not terrible. I watched it a little while ago now. I watched it earlier this year, and then just kind of did some research around it and kind of the build up to this. And watching it, it was better than I remembered it being, because I'd kind of built up this negative impression of it over the years after not watching it for so long. But there are a lot of points in the movie that make you chuckle, that have those kind of genuine moments, and they were able to achieve those with a lot of the returning writing team from the earlier Golden Year episodes. They put a lot of effort into bringing back some really star writers, which they weren't able to necessarily replicate the gold that was the earlier seasons, but there is quality there, and there is quality over what we would see in some of the seasons around it and after it. It does have jokes that don't age very well. It does have jokes that aren't very good, just generally, and it has themes that I don't think work particularly well, but it is an okay adaptation. It isn't the one that I would have liked to have seen, but it works.
Do you think that the creators should have made an attempt to make a Simpsons film earlier in the timeline, like in the 90s? Do you think that would have been better for the series as a whole?
It's tricky because you don't want that butterfly effect of other episodes that we love from that time not having the same level of quality because they focused on a movie instead. Because that is a very real thing that happens within TV show to movie adaptations. Like, I know if you look at something like going to the world of anime, like My Hero Academia often releases a movie that coincides with the television show. And when that movie is in production, the TV episodes suffer so much in terms of the quality of animation, the quality of writing, the pacing. It is so night and day different to seeing the quality of episodes that when there isn't a film being made concurrently and when there is one.
Did someone say filler episode?
I mean, if you did it in the earlier seasons, if you did it in between 6 and 7, would you have gotten some of the great episodes from season 6 and 7 that we did get? Season 6 is probably my favorite season. I'm trying to remember now what I said my favorite season was in the episode we did so long ago. I think it might have been 9 I said, actually. Yeah, but season 6 and 7 both have so many iconic episodes that might have suffered and might not have been written as a result of the movie coming out at that time. So it might be fortunate that we received the film at the time we did, and we still have those great episodes to look back on.
That is an excellent point. Creating a film, and don't get me wrong, I'm no expert in the field of professional filmmaking, but I can only imagine that if you are running a show, and I know Matt Groening, I don't know if he had Futurama going on at the same time in 2007, maybe not.
Futurama season 6 came out in early 2008.
At the end of the day, though, it's interesting to think that this came out during a time where I think people were getting fatigued with The Simpsons. Like, I know especially I was getting fatigued. I watched all the old seasons. I read the comics as well, and even the comics were getting very lackluster. So I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I'm really a Simpsons fan anymore. And this is the thing that I will admit did reinvigorate my interest in The Simpsons, into Springfield and the wider world of this show. But I agree with you. I do think that looking at it from that perspective, if it wasn't for the film coming out this time, then it would have had a certain ripple effect of affecting our favourite episodes from season 7, season 8, even season 9. I feel as if they didn't have the chance or the time to do certain episodes, it would have been just more clip shows or lazy guest starrings. And I know we haven't brought that up in this film, but I mean, there's not really many guest stars. There's like Green Day, there's Tom Hanks. Yeah, there's a fair few. All I'll say is I'm glad we got the Simpsons film, and even though we do get that scene at the end where Maggie kind of teases and says sequel in the post-credit scene, you know, before Marvel made it cool. Yeah, we never got a sequel. See, at this stage, see, unless they had a story to tell, and I think people have said that they don't really have a story to tell in a movie format, but if they had the right story...
I'm surprised they didn't. It was very huge box office success, so it was interesting that they didn't then follow that up. I just remember that Futurama had a bunch of movies itself as well. So Futurama had movies coming out almost like twice a year around that time. Like there was the one in 2007, there was like 2 in 2008, and there was one in 2009. So they had a lot of movies happening around that time.
Yeah, I remember those films. They were okay as far as I remember, but they were like straight to DVD, I'm sure.
Yeah, they very much varied in quality. I think they were like TV movies, so I think I remember seeing them come out, a lot of them come out on TV before they saw them come out on DVD.
Whereas the Simpsons movie was the one they were putting all their eggs into the basket for. But yeah, all I'll say is as a closing point, I'm glad we got the Simpsons film. It's not perfect, but then again, the Simpsons isn't perfect, and yet we still love it for the fractured, dysfunctional show that it's become. It's become pretty much a reflection of the Simpsons themselves.
I was going to say exactly that.
But at the end of the day, that's why we love it. We love it for all its wacky hijinks, for all the jokes and everything, and the heart behind it. So if somehow you're a Simpsons fan, or you're maybe just a younger fan listening to this in the future, and you think, should I watch this film? You might as well. Go watch it if you've got Disney Plus. And I hope to God Disney Plus is still around in 5 to 10 years, because people listening to this will be like, what the hell's a Disney Plus? On that note, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on and discussing this film.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to chat about this movie, and hopefully the listeners at home enjoyed what we had to say. And if you have any opinions you want to share with us, anything you think we missed out that we should have brought up, or if you have any comments on what we've said, then please do feel free to get in touch with us.
And you can reach out to us on our website, podpage.com/Chatsunami. We are also available on Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps if you want to catch up with the rest of the Simpsons Month episodes. We, of course, have also got a Patreon page, patreon.com/Chatsunami, where you can get early access to episodes a week early, and you can also get exclusive content there, so please feel free to check that out. I also want to give a huge shout out to our Pandalorian patrons, Robotic Battle Toaster and Sonia. Thank you so much for supporting the channel.
If you'd like to hear the latest news as well coming from us when episodes come out, and just have general chit chat, you can also find the channel on Twitter at ChatSunamiPod, and you can find me at GreenShield95. I don't tweet very much through that platform anymore, but if you'd like, you can follow me there.
As always, thank you all so much for listening. Stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, please don't pollute your local lakes. You're going to get a dome on top of you.